My name is Rodrigo. My wife Gabriella and I have been swinging for a long time. I'm a little over 40 now, but my wife and I have been swinging for about 15 years. It started the same way as John and Veronica. My wife seduced a girlfriend, sat, chatting, drinking wine, watching a movie. The girls started hugging, kissing, and it went on and on. The ladies showed so much passion for each other that I was afraid to approach them. I poured myself a whiskey and just sat and watched. After half an hour, they broke away from each other and switched to me. What a number it was, I'll tell you. To this day, as I remember, so everything inside boils. Then, the next day, my wife and I discussed it all, talked, laughed, and somehow together decided that we liked it. That's how we moved into the swinging category. We used to live in another country, traveled a lot, tried a lot of things. After some time, we came back to the city where we were both born. Through the internet, we met a few couples, with whom we met from time to time, but there was no drive. Everything was somehow gray, routine, and boring. Then I decided it was wrong. A city of more than 500,000 people and such boredom. We need to add some color and drive. Change things up a bit, diversify. I knew no one had ever done anything like this here. I decided to try and, with my own money, organize the first swing party. I myself am a businessman. Now in free-floating, organizational skills came in handy and in relation to the hobby. So I gradually organized my unofficial hobby club. I called it simply, The Friends. According to my most approximate estimates, in our city there are about 1,000 open couples like ours and, accordingly, The Friends had a lot of chances. At first, though, there was a lot of trouble. And the police came, laid everyone out on the floor, looking for drugs or whatever they were looking for. Then they tried to bring me in for organizing a brothel or prostitution. Landlords started crying after that, of course, and I had to change places. In a word, the province. I have long noticed an interesting fact. People who are established in their profession are absolutely liberated in their personal life. Now in our community, there are many different entrepreneurs, managers, officials. But still, this is only our hobby, which to some extent exists separately from reality. Therefore, none of us wants to reveal any personal details and show ourselves. After all, one thing is your hobby, but besides it we have a completely ordinary life. Also, as my experience and the works of old Freud have shown, in sex everyone is looking for what he lacks in ordinary life. An enforcer or firefighter, forced by duty to be inflexible, finds a dominant wife who will make him kneel down and obey her. While his own wife can enjoy the company of a young, muscular swimming coach, occasionally watching the coach's wife beat the excess noradrenaline out of her husband with a belt. And all this happens in full view of everyone. No one has to hide anything, and yet everyone is happy. We are perfectly normal people. We don't rape or assault anyone without mutual consent. Ask any guy or man you know. Would he refuse to spend the night with several girls at once? No one would refuse. Ask any girl or woman. Has she ever fantasized about sex with two men? According to statistics, at least 80% have such fantasies. So why limit ourselves in our pleasures when we can live a full and active life? That's what I'm saying. Why?
Hello, friends. After the penultimate issue we received a lot of messages saying that everything we tell here are fairy tales and wet fantasies of the period of adolescent pollutions. So, our dear envious children, as well as their parents, you do not know the whole truth of life. And, in general, you don't know it. And now I'll tell you a little about it for her. Or rather, not myself, but I will retell the story of one of my friends, the reliability of which is confirmed by a number of data from different sources. And he experienced in his rebellious youth so much that this episode is just a reason for a slight smile, not a story about something grandiose. So here we go. Somewhere around the middle of the noughties I was strumming the strings and throat in an alternative gifted via. At rehearsals and concerts I worked my ass off, but youth and hormones did their insidious work. I wanted to fuck so badly. And with this good purpose I regularly monitored the internet in search of female fans of vocal instrumental genre. And here on one of the forums I got hooked up with one, not by years developed, young maiden, very sharp on the tongue. We agreed to meet after the rehearsal in the center, to walk around and have a cultural drink. Actually, everything happened in one evening, from strolling to sitting, from sitting to lying down. And so, when I, waving empty decimeters, shoveled out to the balcony to properovata lungs, in my back flew. Could you get out of here in the next half hour? You know, I've got a pretty serious girlfriend. It could be embarrassing. Out of respect for the lady, I swallowed all the seemingly witty questions practically together with a cigarette and tactfully snuck out. It would seem that this affair could be considered exhausted, but Dick. A week later, my beautiful and witty lady dialed my number and thoughtfully asked, "Tell me, are you capable of making small talk about distractions in the presence of a woman you've had sex with? My girlfriend wants to look at you." On the one hand, I thought at the time, I'm not a portrait of the president to be admired. And on the other hand, the size of a shill in my buttocks didn't allow me to concentrate on such trivialities for long. I gave the okay and went to the address. At the table sat a real Valkyrie, shoulders, bust, tight braid. From somewhere behind her, my recent acquaintance was waving her paw. The maiden of battle gave me a stern look and asked, "Do you drink dark beer?" In about 20 minutes we were already scratching our heads over science fiction and computer games. An hour later we moved on to poetry and philosophy. In 2 I was dragged to a familiar apartment, where I was literally battered in 4 hands and knocked out on the bed. And what happened next was something that you, wet imaginers, up to 16 and older, can only imagine. For about a year, we saw each other periodically. The 3 of us. Besides the joys of sex, we just hung out, went to the movies, talked about general topics. I was fixing and upgrading the ladies' computers, and they were desperately trying to feed me. And then life's paths diverged. All at once. Quite peacefully and naturally. I keep in touch, but we communicate on an ad hoc basis. So, things happen, what the hell? All the events described in the video took place in reality. Names have been changed out of respect for the characters, and for the peace of mind of their families. Catherine, 32 years old, married for 5 years, has a child. She was running late. However, her appearance was quite expressive. When she ran into the cafe, she immediately showed me her dick. Such a hello made me choke on my beer. However, it was her way of apologizing and demonstrating the mood for conversation. "Wow," I commented respectfully. The cock was huge, full screen on the iPhone and glowing a little green. I think the author of the photo used a filter. "It's not the husband's, is it?" I asked. The girl shook her head, staring at the menu. In the Facebook profile often appear photos where she and her husband lying on the couch with the dog, having dinner or smoking hookah in a cafe. In short, the chronicle of a happy family life. Catherine chooses her white wine and begins. Many of my girlfriends exchange erotic photos with men. We have our own chat room where we share what they send us. They send us dicks, asses, hairy legs. Whose pictures? Guys on social media, acquaintances, co-workers, it's easy now. I'm answering that, too. There's a female thing, though. You don't know how much it takes to get a good shot of your poor tits. You need the right light, the right skin, a pimple pops, you go fucking crazy. The girls taught me, it's simple, you need to find someone else's boobs on Instagram and just copy them. And that's it. No one has ever been burned. Catherine says that often come photos from her former lover, a top manager, a man from a respectable, well-known family. That's his cock you just saw, now you'll know him. We don't sleep with him anymore, but he occasionally texts me and Catherine cuckoo, checking to see if I'm on the phone. And then it goes zing and a picture of his gizmo comes in. Husband is a decent man, never gets on my phone. I nod understandingly. Myself, of course, painting a picture, trying the situation on myself. Here we are lying with my girlfriend on the couch, watching a TV series. Her cell phone vibrates. "Put it on pause, dear, I'll answer it for work," she asks and pokes at the screen. Is someone's dick being ferried into our apartment at the same time? Catherine talks about everything calmly, not lowering her voice in the slightest, not embarrassing the waiters who pass nearby. Tells her that she now has a steady lover, a co-worker. A good friend, Catherine tells Catherine, is the key to proper cheating. Last year I told my husband 3 times that I was going to the seaside with Claire. I might not have cheated, but I missed the attention. My husband has a completely different mode. He does not like to go out, hates partying, and he needs sex once a week. I do not have enough. What's the solution? A friend dragged her unhappy spouse to a sexologist, spent a lot of money and time. And instead of once a week, oh, that's a victory. They slept together twice, and not for long. And what do you think? She ended up having an affair anyway. I keep looking for some sign of crisis in Catherine, some wormhole that's eating her from the inside out, maybe drama, symptoms that suggest she's floundering, confused. But no, her eyes sparkle, she laughs happily and drinks her wine, leaving traces of pink lipstick on the glass. When we leave, I imagine a whole army of girlfriends who stand in a dense wall, covering our women with friends, and mumble, "We are going to the sea, she will stay with me today, we went to the exhibition together, to the movies, sorry, hung out at a classmate." I read somewhere that the appearance of a lover or mistress is always a sign of a crisis in the family system. But lovers and mistresses can play both a destructive and a strengthening role. In some cases, if the crisis is destructive, the lover or mistress breaks down the system. And in other cases, the lover or mistress are donors to the system, that is, the link that gives energy to preserve the family. Take away the lover, the contradictions will reach their peak, and the family will fall apart. I know one married couple who, knowing about the existence of a lover and a mistress, existed safely for about 10 years.
We've been together for 10 years, 7 of them married. When we started dating, I was living in another state. And at that time, I knew perfectly well that John, a young, temperamental guy, would find it difficult to live like that. The solution was an open relationship. This agreement is still in effect for our couple now. We can be with other people, but with 2 conditions. It must be safe, no diseases, and no relationship. Family is sacred. From a free relationship, we came to swinging. It started banal. We seduced my best friend. I was the initiator to try something new. I suggested to my husband, and he was so confused I slammed, shy, mumbled something like, "Well, I do not even know. Well, I do not even know." But I knew. We decided we'd give it a try. Invited my friend, a nice evening, talking, wine, and it worked out great. We all loved it. My husband, in general, then walked around proud as a lion for a long time. That's how we became swingers. And it doesn't mean that John and I have something not working out in our personal lives. We're doing great. But you can always do better, juicier. Swinging for us is new emotions, sensations, feelings. The most memorable meeting we had was with a very young Armenian couple. They are both very bright, interesting, temperamental. We met in a social network, as it often happens. And we decided to combine the pleasant with the pleasant. And we went on vacation to Armenia. The guys organized several unforgettable sightseeing tours around the country. And here we, who thought that we were very savvy and had tried a lot of things, were in for another surprise. The girl was pregnant. It was something incredible and delightful. You won't believe how cool it all was. Nature, mountains, waterfalls, Armenian cuisine. On one of the excursions, they took us somewhere very high up in the mountains, and there was a lake with crystal clear water. And not a single living soul around. We pitched a tent, grilled kebabs, bathed in the lake, and constantly made love together. On the 3rd day, a local shepherd named Surin joined us. Like all natives of these places, he was not tall, not more than 1.60 meters, but looking at his flexible body and hard as a stone muscles, no one would believe that he was already over 60. Add to that a beard and thick vegetation covering his whole body, and you get the full look of this mountain satyr. He brought us a carcass of a young lamb, which we immediately roasted, and a canister of local wine. Anyway, well, how could we not invite such a wonderful man to join us? My husband at first was not very happy about it. He is sometimes a bit of a snob, But when I promised him another girlfriend upon arrival, he put all doubts aside. In short, such a vacation is not forgotten. And we are now waiting for our friends to come to us with a return visit. And the coolest thing happens when people from ordinary life meet at a swinging party. And it happens more often than you might think. We met a couple of our acquaintances once. Of course, everyone's first reaction is different. The funniest one was when John was having fun with some girls and I went to the bar. When I came back, the companion of one of them had already joined them. I looked closely and I saw something familiar. And then he turns around. Like in a movie, we meet eyes and both our jaws drop. It's my former boss. Hello, Mr. Barzoon. As soon as he saw me, he immediately fussed, grabbed the girl with whom he had come, and sideways, disappeared unnoticed. I wanted to catch up, to ask him how his wife was, to say hello to her, but I changed my mind. It's not quite right, of course, but on the other hand, his wife, when I last saw her 5 years ago, probably weighed 100 kilograms, and that's with a height of 160. In general, perhaps, it's better to live the way we live than to hide, constantly deceive their spouses. The second equally funny incident was when we met our son's first teacher at a party. She was there with her young husband, the gym teacher. They were both quite taken aback at first. Clearly, they did not want to meet anyone but the parents of their students. However, my husband and I decided that such an opportunity should not be missed, especially since they are both young, handsome guys. We took them aside, sat, chatted, and had a few drinks. They told us that it was one of their first outings of this kind, and they were naturally a bit nervous. We helped them to calm down and loosen up. And John afterwards, at face value, appreciated and revealed the depth of her pedagogical talent. But on the contrary, I did not like her husband, a mountain of muscles and no imagination. In a word, thinking weight. We're not perverts or crazy people. I'm also a wife, mom of 2, work freelance, do house cleaning every day, do laundry, iron things for the kids and shirts for my husband, cook. This year I made compote, zucchini, jam, 2 jars of which my husband has already eaten. John, the head of the production department in one organization, in the mornings takes the children to kindergarten, works. We are average middle-class people. And we meet people of different ages, physical data, and nationalities. Their professions are also different. Factory workers, construction workers, drivers, teachers, policemen, and soldiers. Therefore, we are not agitating anyone for anything. We just wish families to love each other more often, longer, and better.
Many years ago, before New Year's Eve, I was traveling on a train with interesting fellow travelers. There were a couple who were not old enough to be married. Cheerful and good-natured, they were touchingly caring for each other all the way, while looking at each other with such tenderness and love that when I looked at them, I was amused. Then we talked to them and their story was remembered forever. You could say that they had everything like in a novel. And for them this day, December 31st, is a very significant date. And at the same time for both of them it is the second marriage. But let me start at the beginning. Elizabeth, that was the name of my traveling companion, was married for 20 years when she found out that her husband had a mistress with whom he had been in a relationship for 2 years. And she found out like this. Once her coworker brought to work photos from some celebration where she was a guest. And then, in one of the photos, Elizabeth accidentally recognizes her husband, but with another woman. Without betraying her excitement, she calmly questioned her employee about everything, found out when the celebration was, and, having received the answer, remembered that on that day her husband was away on a business trip. Then, trying her best not to show what was going on in her soul, she secretly knew who this woman and this man were. "Oh, that's Dorothy, my neighbor." The employee waved her hand. "Her husband is at work all day long. While he's at work, Daniel, Elizabeth's husband, comes to see her. He is a cheerful, generous man. He buys her expensive gifts and pays attention to her. Dorothy says that in bed he is a fire. Once at the weekend they went to the sea, so, she says, they there the sea only from the window, and so even out of the room did not leave once. A weekend-long sex marathon." "And her husband, what?" Elizabeth was surprised at such a relationship. "What about her husband?" "He is always at work, cardiologist works. And she is a fun woman. She wants to have fun, male attention, want to have fun, so she and Daniel and sniffed at work. He has a sick wife, paralyzed. He can't divorce her yet." "Oh, that's how it is. His wife is sick, paralyzed," thought the paralyzed Elizabeth, walking briskly and athletically towards her car. What a jerk. Now she suddenly realized clearly why sex had almost completely disappeared from their bed for the past couple of years. "Oh, he assured me, the bastard, that because of his workload, he was having a hard time once every 2 weeks. She had a heated conversation with her husband that evening and he moved out the same day. She cried all night with pain and resentment. Then, in the afternoon at work, she had a heart attack. She was hospitalized and saw a cardiologist who turned out to be the husband of her husband's mistress. But she didn't know it at the time. While she was in the hospital, her husband began to meet Dorothy. As it turned out, Dorothy's husband had long known that she was cheating on him, but did not divorce her only because of the children, finding an outlet in his work. However, when her affair with Daniel went beyond all decency, he filed for divorce and while the lawyer prepared the documents, practically lived in the hospital. And so, one day, Dorothy decided to visit her husband at work to discuss issues related to the divorce. And as it happened, she and Elizabeth ran into each other in a narrow hallway. Having never met in person before, they both instantly realized who was who. Dorothy lashed out at Elizabeth, accusing her of faking her illness in order to avoid divorcing her husband, who had long since fallen out of love with her. Dorothy's husband, Elizabeth's doctor, intervened in their quarrel. And then everything fell into place. The situation broke up. The fighters were separated at different ends of the ring. After Dorothy left, Elizabeth and Mason, that was the name of her doctor, had a long talk on a heart-to-heart. Having become friends in misfortune, they decided not to stop there. And 6 months later, on December 31st, Mason proposed to Elizabeth and they got married. And they have been living together for over 20 years, but their feelings for each other are still warm. This is the irony of fate. To find happiness, they had to go through the betrayal of their spouses. Daniel began to live with Dorothy in the house her husband had left her. They seemed to have found each other too. Hot and adventurous, both decided that their star hour had arrived. They traveled extensively, often liking to fly to Las Vegas for a weekend airing. However, too frequent airing blew out their savings and left them with only debts and loans. In an attempt to maintain their former lifestyle, Daniel went on a job forgery. The deception came to light. In order not to go to jail, he was forced to sell off the rest of his property. As a result, he was left without money, without a place to live, and without a job. From these experiences he had a stroke and was partially, and they also say that God has no sense of humor, paralyzed. As soon as Daniel started having money problems, Dorothy kicked him out of her house, and when he became paralyzed, she stopped even answering his calls, telling him that she needed a stud for her life, not a gelding in a diaper. After that, she quickly married a Russian who got rich from real estate in Florida, whom she met in Vegas when she was still living with Daniel. She bore him a daughter, and he made her a founding member of a number of his companies. Everything was going great for 10 years until suddenly he came to the attention of the FBI as a member of a criminal group engaged in money laundering through real estate. Without waiting to be arrested, Surin fled through Mexico back to Russia, leaving his wife with a child and large debts. And also a number of questions the IRS had for her, as Dorothy was smart enough to get into his affairs much deeper than she should have. Anyway, it's not for nothing that they say that everything that is done for the best.